Realistically, though, do you think you can put forward that alliance? It's one thing we've seen, of course, in the Brecon by-election last week, big victory for the Liberal Democrats, that you were able to get the Greens and Plaid Cymru not to stand, and of course Labour vote had completely collapsed there. But come a general election, things will be rather different, and it would end up being effectively your party and the Labour Party vying often for that Remain vote. I can't really see, with no love lost between Jeremy Corbyn and Jo Swinson, and indeed local parties as well, parties standing aside. You're going to face exactly the same problem the Tories are going to face with the Brexit Party, where we're going to be seeing split Leave votes and split Remain votes. So how can you be sure that an election would actually deliver the result that you want?
Well, there's a few things. Let's just break that apart. The issue of a Remain alliance, let's deal with that first. I don't believe that you could have a Remain alliance that includes parties which do not have formally in their manifestos an unequivocal commitment not only to a people's vote but to stopping Brexit and remaining in the European Union. And clearly Labour isn't sitting in that space. It isn't a Remain party. It is led by a leader who is a Brexiter. And at the moment, their policy is we might have a people's vote if we're facing a no-deal situation or a Tory Brexit. But if on the other side of a general election, Labour is elected, it will be seeking its own Brexit deal. It will be seeking to leave the European Union. So there are no circumstances I can envisage with it having that current policy position where they would be part of a Remain alliance, or any Labour MP or candidate could be included in that kind of arrangement. So I think when you're talking about a Remain alliance, you are looking at the Remain parties, which is the Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru, the SNP, and some of the other smaller groups potentially, and the Green Party, of course. That's what you're looking at. I do not see how you could have Conservative or Labour candidates included in that, because they will be carrying a whip, which is not a Remain whip, if you like, from their main party. So you raise a good point there, and I just...
Dominic Cummings, obviously the man who ran the Vote Leave campaign, and of course the man who's now senior advisor in Number 10, charged with delivering Brexit on October 31st. He's quoted as saying in the papers of the week that Tories don't care about the NHS, and actually the public perception that lots of Tory MPs don't really care about people like them. It's quite true, he says they don't. Is it true Tories don't really care about the NHS?
A total rubbish. I mean, firstly, I care deeply about the NHS, and there's a reason for that, Julia. It's because the NHS has saved the life of members of my family. My sister, just about 2 years ago, had an almost fatal accident and was taken by air ambulance to hospital, and she would have died, and the NHS saved her. So we have an emotional connection, all of us, with the NHS. And if you look at the reaction of my colleagues today to this funding announcement, people are incredibly excited about having new NHS facilities in their area. And loads of local MPs have worked really hard to push these projects forward, like Sarah Newton in Cornwall. I was mentioning the new Cornwall hospital. Andrew Selous driving forward the improvements that we're able to sign on today in Luton. A whole host of other colleagues. I think it's... I think, the NHS touches a nerve for all of us because it's so important.
Do you think it's fair for people to pass some criticism, some responsibility for these, at least one of these killings, onto Donald Trump?
No, I don't think so. I think politicizing this is really obscene right now. I think Beto O'Rourke, running to the scene of the crime and making this about him and about the president. It doesn't help anybody. I don't think it's useful at all.
Do thoughts and prayers help these people? Because by definition, people having guns and having access to semi-automatic weapons to mass kill mums and dads and children in a Walmart, that is a political decision, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And this has been going on for several generations. Remember these like sort of racist, white supremacist mass murders or terrorism have been going on for decades. And remember, the first big terrorist attack in the U.S. was not 9/11. It was in 1995 in Oklahoma City when these complete nut jobs blew up a federal office building, including a daycare center in Oklahoma City. So look, I know I'm not supposed to use the word nut job I got in trouble with Kay Burley once for saying that. But look, there's no other way to describe these people.
Oh, no, you pick up a semi-automatic weapon and you go and kill indiscriminately. You are a nut job, no question at all.
It's absolutely sickening.
But the point is, but every country has they have people who are mentally ill. Every country has. The point is that America is the only country that has mass shootings. No other Western country has them on anything like the same scale. In the countries where we have had them, in Australia, in the UK, we have taken away the weapons. The reality is that it's the ability of people who are mentally unwell, who are full of hatred, or whatever their motivations, their ability to get hold of weapons that can kill people en masse.
It would be, a democratic outrage for Westminster to refuse the people of Scotland their say on such an important matter where there has been a material change in circumstances, particularly over the situation where it looks like Boris Johnson's trying to engineer a no-deal Brexit and all of the harm and the consequences that comes with in terms of jobs and living standards.
And of course, you, wanting to respect the referendum result, that would in return allow you, of course, to respect the referendum result from the EU referendum in 2016.
Well, obviously the people of Scotland voted 62%.
Hold on a minute though. No, come on.
Okay.
If the SNP want people to respect the referendum result in a second referendum where you may possibly vote to leave, I think because they say people who want to have a second referendum would probably be people who want to change the current circumstance, otherwise why have one? On that basis, given that we have you had a vote in 2014, which should be also respected, which was a vote to stay, 45% only wanted to leave, you have to accept then that the UK-wide poll in 2016 to leave the EU was counted not on an England basis, it was counted on a UK-wide basis. The UK as a whole wanted to leave.
You have to look back at what's happened since that referendum in 2016. The Scottish Government, indeed the Scottish Parliament, did try to compromise over Brexit and say if you have to do this thing, then you should respect what's required in Scotland. So, if you do have to go ahead about it, here's a paper which the Scottish Government produced on how Brexit would, have the least form of harm on Scotland. The UK Government, the Westminster, completely ignored that attempt to look for some common ground.
Do you think that we would be prepared enough for a no deal look, there may be a few problems in the early days or weeks, but to weather that? Or do you think this is all being predicated by Boris Johnson on doing all the things that make it necessary to look like he's willing to go for it when actually he doesn't want a no deal at all? There's no evidence he's ever wanted a no deal.
I think we're perfectly well prepared for it. And actually, we were months ago. I went up to speak to the head of the port of Holyhead, which is the main crossing point for Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and they said they were prepared months ago for it. They couldn't understand why members of Parliament were talking of these doomsday scenarios. They basically said it's created a bit of work for us and it's all very inconvenient, but it ain't going to be a major problem because we can cope with it. And this was months ago. There's been a serious attempt since Boris got in, and there is a serious attempt now to make sure that everything is sorted out in order that things go smoothly. There has to be an assumption that we may very well leave without any kind of a deal and that we just go on to WTO terms. In other words, we'll be trading with Europe in exactly the same way we trade with America at the moment. Guess what? America is our biggest trading partner. We do more trade with America than with any other single country in the European Union. So that's the kind of doomsday scenario, a scenario where we trade just as we do on a daily basis with America. One other bit of anecdote, because I've done my best to drill into this. I also went round the port of Avonmouth a few months ago, where they have millions of tons of goods coming in all the time from all over the world, most of it from outside the European Union, and there's not a customs officer in sight because, of course, this idea that there are men in uniforms, barbed wire, barriers and all the rest of it is very 20th century. It's not how things are done anymore. Everything is sort of online these days. Customs paperwork isn't paperwork at all. It's online documents, and things are cleared without people having to go into porter cabins or talk to men in uniforms at barbed wire fences. So a lot of the stuff that's being whipped up at the moment is being whipped up by Remainers who simply cannot accept that Britain's voted to leave the European Union and we're getting out on the 31st.
It does appear that things have changed, that Boris Johnson preparing for no deal, the hiring of the likes of Dominic Cummings and the basically banging of heads together that's gone on in Westminster in the last week or so, saying, right, let's start preparing, let's get on with it, spend the money. Sajid Javid, the Chancellor, putting the cash available for no deal planning. Looks like Brussels does actually believe it could happen, which means they might well come to the table, in which case that's a good thing, isn't it? Even someone like you, fearful of no deal, will be pleased if this gets a deal over the line with Brussels, no?
Well, the truth is no one knows what Boris Johnson's strategy is at the moment because it keeps changing. Indeed, he's running, it appears, which may be the Cummings strategy, which is to create maximum confusion, is if he's got several strategies running in parallel. Because remember, Julia, 3 weeks ago he told us there was a 1 in a million chance of us crashing out without a deal. Then, as you say, he's put all this money into preparing for no deal. He's sent David Frost over to talk to leading EU negotiators. You don't send somebody over there to talk unless you intend to talk, but he's not actually putting any proposals on the table. So what I think is actually happening at the moment is what's best described as a phony war in August. And let's be frank, almost everyone's on holiday in August anyway, including most leading officials in London and Whitehall and, of course, also in Brussels.
I've already got an advance copy, and there are two reasons I get advance copies of your books. One is because I'm a huge fan and I can get advance copies of books in advance because I work on a radio show, but also because we're actually very near neighbours as well.
Yes.
And the reason I know Lisa Jewell is because I accosted her in the street while she was on the school run. I went, hello, I've been saying hello to you for 2 years and someone's pointed out you're actually one of my favourite authors. And I hadn't known what one of my favourite authors looked like, and it's you. Lisa did at this point take something of a step back.
Stalker alert.
Yeah, very much stalker alert. But however, still carrying on reading your books. A lot of the books I've really enjoyed about you. I can't get over you sell 4.5 million books. So many people listening will actually read your books. The Third Wife was another favourite of mine. But again,
Yes.
that was very much just a family drama.
Yes.
There wasn't any big crime.
Yeah.
And I'm just being totally immersed in this. But is it easier to write a book that has got, say, a big crime, something very dramatic and very significant has happened, and using that as the sort of the jumping off point?
No.
Is it? Oh, really?
It's much easier to write about like star-crossed lovers and people who should be together and aren't, and these lovely meandering journeys that you can take with romantic fiction. With crime or with thrillers, you can't waste anything. Everything has to mean something. So anything you mention in chapter 2 has to have some relevance in chapter 15. There has to be a satisfactory ending, and all the loose ends need to be tied up.
It can't be someone saying, oh, well, hold on a minute, in chapter 14 you said this and that doesn't tie in. And people really do that now as well, don't they? And in terms of how you write a book, again, I'm in awe of anyone who can finish a book reading or writing, frankly, the hours I do these days. But when you write, do you just start, you have the character in your head, are you always thinking about the next book? Are you ready to go, or does it just, you sit down there with a blank sheet of paper with no ideas and start from scratch?
I never start with no ideas. I very much start with a blank piece of paper. I don't plan, I don't plot, I don't write anything down before I start writing chapter 1. But I do often have a couple of like raw ingredients I think might make a nice soup. It's just like, oh, I've got this and I've got this. Let's shove them in a pot and see where we go with it. But I've never got the whole thing planned or any firm ideas.
And do you sort of have a little shed where you write at the bottom of the garden and everyone has to leave you alone? Do you get really obsessed about it, or are you one of those very organised people you can write for an hour and a half a day?
Absolutely. I can do my daily word count in between 2 hours and 3.5 hours. Yeah. I cannot write if my children are in the house. I cannot. Even if they're being really quiet, but that's actually even more scary, isn't it, when they're being quiet? So generally speaking, I write when they're at school and I write at my dining table. If I need a change of scenery, I'll go and sit in a coffee shop and write in a coffee shop.
Well, you get accosted by local people and fans like me. Are you already working on your next book?
I am. I am.
So when you're publicising, you're talking about the
Yeah.
new book, and people are starting to say to you, "Oh, I've read your book," and
Yes.
people are tweeting you, I've seen, saying that if you've had the early advances, that you're already on the next. Your mind's already moved on.
Yes. Bearing in mind that my last book, Watching You, has just been published in paperback in America as well. So I'm going to be talking to lots of people about Watching You, lots of people about this new one, whilst also,
Love it.
thinking about the next one.
I can't recommend them highly enough, and not because I know you, because genuinely I had read every single one of your books, and she genuinely does think I'm a stalker. I can't. She's only agreed to come into the studio with an armed guard.
Let's be honest, there is no way that we can police our way out of terrorism. I mean, we've known this for many years. In fact, we've been saying it for many years. You can't police a way out of it. When the police get involved, it's pretty much too late. They're already pretty much terrorists. So it is a community issue. Communities need to be supported, allowed to do what they want to do within the laws of the land, of course. And I think we have to realise that taking away all the social workers and all the care workers and all the police over the last 10 years has made the situation worse. So all that is fine. Assimilation aside, I think everyone should assimilate, but of course you should be allowed to look after your own religion, as long as it's within the laws of the land.
We are effectively having not integrated communities, not social cohesion. We have effectively got parallel communities living in almost different parts of the same town and never mixing. That's not integration. That's not social inclusion. That's not going to work, is it?
No, and I think without the integration, you're never going to get a good society, because you've got people that see life completely differently, and that's fine. But of course, if you don't want to, or you never have the opportunity to learn to speak English, because you've come in from overseas, and you've never been given the opportunity to speak English, then you're never going to integrate with the rest of society.
This is particularly an issue we know with Pakistani and Bangladeshi women, and women often who don't work, very low employment rates for those women. And again, this has all been national statistics and expressed by previous governments as concern that you can't possibly integrate if you're not out working, you're not able to speak with people who are not of your local community. Virtually impossible to integrate.
And that is largely the aim of bringing people over who don't speak English, and then keeping them within the community. So this is a big issue. Assimilation, of course, you should be allowed to go by your own religion, do the things that your religion tells you to, as long as it's within the law. And one of the big issues, I think, as well is the thought of Sharia law and people thinking that that's right is completely absurd within our society.
In some cities in this country, we have a Muslim population that lives in one neighbourhood, not mixing with other people, and that quite a few people in that city, the children only go to school with other Muslim children, they only live in neighbourhoods with other Muslim people, only work with other Muslim people, and have very few dealings with anyone who's non-Muslim, and that they are not, by any question, imagine being forced to assimilate, but they're also failing to integrate with mainstream British society. Do you think this is part of the problem, or do you think Neil Bassey was right and that actually people should just carry on living the lives they want to lead? And it seems to me the question is, the thing he's saying is that it's up to everyone else to be a bit more understanding.
Well, I have to say, Julia, I think what Neil Bassey said was off the wall. It's absolutely extraordinary, and I cannot think why he made these comments, which are on more or less every front completely inaccurate and run counter to what we know. Remember, the first Islamist terrorist attack was planned almost 20 years ago in Birmingham. We've had 20 years of learning, and what we have learned is precisely that integration, having an integrated community in the United Kingdom, where it is British values. People choose to come to Britain, and they choose to come in part because of the values we have in this country, where it is British values that people have to adopt. There's nothing wicked or wrong. Conversely, what we know, everything we know about Islamist terrorism is that it thrives in closed communities. I mean, look at the so-called, now hopefully defunct, Islamic State. If ever you wanted to see what a closed community was doing, look at the so-called Islamic State. And we have allowed closed communities to propagate the idea that fanaticism is a good thing, that killing people for a perverted view of religion is acceptable. Nobody has forced anybody to assimilate in the United Kingdom.
These people are bluffing. I voted for Boris because he promised me that we would leave on the 31st of October, come hell or high water, was the phrase we used in the meeting. I believe the Prime Minister. I believe we will leave at Halloween. What I think is now fundamentally important is the European Union now believe him too.
What about the possibility, we're told, front page of the Times today, Labour and SNP hinting at a pact to oust Johnson, a vote of no confidence early in September when Parliament returns, a government of national unity people are talking about. What do you think about those chances in terms of actually ousting Boris before he can actually deliver Brexit?
Well, I believe such an attempt will be seen for the transparent, ridiculous exercise that it would be. Labour and the SNP normally at each other's throats in Scotland, but both desperate to overturn the will of the British people. I don't believe such an exercise would succeed. I believe that the Prime Minister would win a vote of confidence, and it would show Jeremy Corbyn up for the shallow Marxist, anti-Semitic, Hamas-loving, RA-loving charlatan the bloke's been all his life. Other than that, though, I don't have a particular view of it.
What is it the business of the government to tell manufacturers not to offer that choice to people in a free country? Why do you think it's your business or the government's business to tell people how many calories they can consume?
Because I think that companies have got away for far too long, kind of encouraging us, manipulating our behaviour through advertising, marketing and promotion.
The manipulating. Okay. Do you mind me asking, Corso, are you overweight?
I'm not overweight.
You're not
no.
overweight. How have you managed not to be overweight?
Well,
given that we're being manipulated and coerced into buying this stuff, how have you managed?
I still would end up buying some products on promotions, and I know it has an impact on my behaviour.
Wait a minute. So sometimes you want to eat something that's quite high in sugar and fat because it tastes darn good, and you think you should have to pay more for that. Do you mean is it self-flagellation that you think you should be punished and have to pay more? Maybe you could just enjoy eating a cake or a bit of chocolate and not think you have to be punished for it.
Absolutely, and I don't disagree with you. I think we can enjoy it. I think there is opportunity for companies to reduce the levels of sugar and fats and calories in those types of
without
products.
affecting the taste?
Without affecting the taste, because some products that are best-selling products still exist on the market that are lower in calories. The variation is so
hold
wide.
on a minute. You just undermined your whole argument. So there are some lower calorie items that are best-selling items which people are choosing to buy. So why are you having to interfere with the people who want to buy the high-calorie items? Some people need a lot of calories. There are some people, particularly in older age, people who are very, very, very thin. Actually, they need to put on weight. What? This is the thing. People make choices in their lives. People know there isn't a single person in this country who's got a mental age over the age of 5 who doesn't know that eating a big slab of chocolate cake is going to be high calorie, and if they don't do a commensurate amount of exercise to get rid of that, they are going to put weight on, other things being equal.
Evidence that we've seen from the last 20, 30 years in huge studies looking right around the world, big UN studies and so on, has shown that actually industrialised agriculture is very inefficient in terms of the inputs it goes in, and it's causing huge problems. It's really devastating.
Are we or are we not using less land now for agriculture than we used to?
No, we're not. We're using, we're taking what this report will show today is that we're taking more and more land for agriculture more widely. I mean, you've got to bear in mind, imagine this, it also depends where you draw the net, doesn't it? You could have a very intensive poultry farm here in the UK, and you think, it's not taking up much space there. But what perhaps is hidden from that is it's totally dependent on imports of soya from the Amazon. And that's actually resulting in clear-cutting of rainforest in the Amazon. So if you look at the totality of the story, rather than just look down at your feet and look at the immediate surroundings, actually we're seeing that the pressure in intensive agriculture is what's devastating the planet. And it's important to say, we're not saying at Friends of the Earth Studio that everyone should go organic. We're not saying everyone should go vegan or veggie.
Well, thank God.
But Julia, what is devastating is the industrial agriculture that we've had that's been pursued for 20, 30 years now. The evidence of that is really clear.
So when you say what is devastating is the intensive agriculture that has delivered enough food that far fewer people, a tiny percentage of the world is now starving or living on starvation rations. It used to be the case that, 90% of the planet...
It's not sustainable.
What do you mean it's not sustainable? Wait a minute, Craig, on what basis is it not sustainable?
High inputs.
Well, when it's absolutely dependent, number one, on fossil fuels. I mean, all those fertilizers come from fossil fuels. Secondly, completely dependent on pesticides, which are causing devastation for, say, our pollinators like bees and so on. What we need to move to sort of new methods of agriculture, which are things
like GM foods. You're opposed to GM foods as well. That's another one of the efficient.
GM is just another form of intensive industrialised agriculture. It's industrialised agriculture that's caused the problems that this report will be talking about today, and to think that that's going to be part of the solution is ludicrous.
Unprovoked, brutal attack on a police officer. Thankfully, he's still alive, but in critical condition. What's your reaction to that news?
I just hope he recovers. Absolutely horrific. For me, these kind of headlines, they go on every single day. And, I mean this with the utmost respect. People are put in different categories of priority, you see. So this will make huge headlines. There'll probably be a statement from Downing Street. People will say it's horrific, and it absolutely is. But when it is a young person stabbing a young person, it seems to be less of a priority when it actually comes to prevention. I mean, God knows what happened within this situation, and such a horrific thing for that policeman to have to go through and his family, and I do wish him all the best. But I know if it was a fight on the street, this wouldn't make national headlines.
I think most of us would assume that if there were a situation where knives were drawn at all, let alone someone stabbed to death, that this would be some major dispute. Not that would justify it, but at least people could get their heads around it. Increasingly, we're seeing that these knife crime that we're seeing on the streets, and it's not just the capital city, it's happening across the country as well. It is over just sort of someone looks at someone the wrong way, and it's so out of control. What do you think we need to do to tackle this?
It's so complicated. There isn't a single one answer. There's many answers. I think we don't respect the fact that a lot of the younger generation have grown up in a very different environment than ourselves. Social media has a huge impact. Social media lives in a bubble of, it's not real, and they see stabbings, videos, all kinds of things. And when I speak to young people, say out of 3,000 a week, when I say where's a safe place to stab, a lot of them genuinely think there is a safe place that you can stab someone.
You're kidding me.
No,
absolutely. I'm so blown away by that.
Yes.
So to them, it's a little bit like a video game. They don't really see the reality. It's just something. It's something you do to show you're hard, but there aren't really any consequences to it.
Exactly, and then what they see we're giving them such mixed messages, and there was no justification to ever carry a knife.
And I'm not arguing against no deal. No deal might be a very sensible proposal. What I'm saying is if the Prime Minister believes that is the sensible position, he has to, first of all, try and persuade the members of Parliament to agree with it. Now, the likelihood is he will fail in that. If he still wishes to go ahead with no deal, then he can't just ignore Parliament. He has to do what we have all understood for 100, 200 years. He has to call a general election so the electorate, the rest of us, can take that decision. And if the electorate support the Prime Minister on no deal, then they will return the government. If they don't, then he will lose that election. But that is the proper way to do it.
That is the proper way to do it, but one could argue...
way to do it.
But Sir Malcolm...
correct myself.
Sir Malcolm, but you already know, we have already had the verdict of the British people in terms... But Sir Malcolm, with all due respect, Sir Malcolm, with all due respect, could I actually finish asking a question? Would that be okay? Just so we're not talking over each other.
There is a deal.
Sir Malcolm, could I... Okay. Sir Malcolm, sir...
The electorate have never been given the opportunity to have a review.
Okay. Sir Malcolm, the people were given a vote in 2016 by MPs, and then MPs voted to invoke Article 50, which meant that we left. And under the terms of invoking Article 50, it doesn't say with a deal we leave the European Union on. Well, it was supposed to. Can I please? Sir? Could I? No, sir. Could I please? Sir Malcolm.
Very clever.
Sir Malcolm, could I please finish a question, and then I will leave you to give plenty of time to give your answer. But if I could just please finish the question. So, and then in 2017, every Tory MP, and indeed every Labour MP, but every Tory MP was elected and have formed a majority government, only just the DP, on the promise that they would deliver a Brexit on the date that had been already announced, and that it said in the manifesto they believe that no deal is better than a bad deal. On what basis do you think that Parliament has not already endorsed a no-deal Brexit?
Because the electorate were never asked to fight the general election on the basis that we are going to leave leave with no deal.
But it was in the manifesto.
True, and the Prime Minister knows that to be true, and he's wriggling to try and find a way through a terrible dilemma that he has.
Should you really be encouraging people to vote for the Brexit Party when that actually might stop there being a Conservative Leaver government that could actually deliver Brexit?
Well, excuse my scepticism on words being delivered. We heard from Theresa May over 100 times that we'd leave on the 29th of March. It didn't happen. Can we trust Boris Johnson? His track record's not great, and if he says a week after the election, of course we'll still leave, how do we know that's not? How do we know that's true? How do we know he won't ask for another extension? He'll sign up to a watered-down version of Theresa May's deal, which is Brino, Brexit in name only. How can we trust him? We have got to make sure that Brexit is actually delivered, and the proof is in the eating.
So for you, if there's an election before the October the 31st and we actually leave the EU, you're saying the Brexit Party is still supposed 1st of November? If we've already left, I mean, you'll have to be campaigning, presumably, if there were. I mean, it would be a bizarre situation the weeks running up to a no-deal Brexit that we would actually be in campaign mode, and yet it could be that on the actual election day, if we've left, you might want to change your tune and say something different. What would be the advice to Brexit Party supporters if there were an election the day after?
Vote for the Brexit Party. That if a whole campaign is based not knowing whether we are genuinely going to leave, that doesn't change in the couple of hours over the exact moment we do leave. And I think it's really important to point out that this is about more than just Brexit. It's about trusting our politicians. It's about returning faith in the democratic system. That's what's come under so much stress in the last 3 years. It's having representatives who haven't undertaken the will of their electors.
And in terms of whether or not you trust Boris Johnson, that's one thing. Do you trust your own brother? He's a leader of the Commons now, Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's part of this government. A lot of people who were leavers who were perhaps a little bit wary of Boris Johnson, giving his shilly-shallying on some issues over the years. Felt that once he brought in Dominic Cummings from the Vote Leave campaign, once he brought in people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, that those people we know want to deliver Brexit and a proper Brexit, and there's a little bit more trust. Do you trust in a government that has your own brother in it?
I trust my brother implicitly. He's a very principled man. But he has part of collective responsibility. It isn't entirely down to him. He is part of a government that's led by Boris Johnson. There are Remainers, lots of them, in the cabinet who may be listened to. Their voices may shout loud. There's an awful lot of pressure from the arch-Remainers on the wing of the Conservative Party, such as Dominic Grieve, who are trying to force the government's hand by threatening votes of no confidence and voting against their own party. I think we've got to make sure this is actually delivered, but also that we can trust our politicians. Hold them to account.
Natalie Bennett points out that the world would be a better place. Human beings would live a healthier life. They would live longer if we didn't do that. If it wasn't done by force, if it wasn't done by tax, but we were just encouraged, and I'm not quite sure how, maybe with the very cheap carrot as opposed to the expensive stick. Would that not be? Why would you have a problem with that?
Plant-based diets are not healthy. I mean, it's not healthy to subsist on nuts and seeds and garden vegetables and so on. That is not a healthy-based diet. A diet needs variety. You need different sources of nutrition. It's only relatively recently, in historical terms, that so much of humankind has been able to eat meat, to enjoy meat, to have hamburgers, to have steaks, all these wonderful things which the majority of us really like to eat. And now we're being told this is going to destroy the planet, you will be responsible for Armageddon, if future generations suffer, it is your fault. I mean, yes, they are not forcing us by law to change the way we eat, but they are making us feel guilty every time we take a bite of a hamburger. And that's a miserable way to go through life.
Natalie Bennett, I mean, Brendan O'Neill says, look, this is all, talk of catastrophes and emergencies and Armageddon. An awful lot, we know an awful lot of people, just judging by, I mean, what people might say in a poll about being concerned by climate change and things is one thing. What people are actually willing to do to change their own lives is quite another. Do you think that actually an awful lot of people, they'll either see this report or not see the report, hear this discussion, and they'll just carry on with their own lives? And I've, for instance, got some lovely steaks for dinner tonight. I'm not going to feel guilty about it at all. People going off to have a burger or their fried chicken this evening will just shrug and carry on with their lives.
I think Brendan absolutely misrepresented what I said, because I am not concerned with individual behaviour. I want to give people choices, and we don't have choices at the moment.
Why don't we have choices?
We have a system that is pushing onto people. I wasn't attacking the school children in the chicken shops. I was attacking the fact that we have those chicken shops planning laws. The way we've arranged our society is for the benefit of private profit, not for the benefit of the well-being of our society. Supermarkets have been allowed to get away with wasting all of this food. We have this meat being produced in factory farms, which are also causing massive pollution. We're hearing a lot of reports this morning about how bad asthma is, and that's related to factory farming. We have a huge problem with antibiotic resistance. We are taking the medical antibiotics we need to be able to have modern medicine, shoveling it into livestock in huge quantities, and we're losing those antibiotics. These are all things that people have no choices over. They're being done to us. And we have a huge problem with that lack of choice, because the decisions are being made by the supermarkets, by the multinational food companies.
But again, if
they're being allowed to determine these things, it's not a question of individual choice. I'm not concerned about what's on your plate tonight. I'm concerned about people having the real options, the real choices,
but you said
and keeping clean air and keeping the soil and being able to feed ourselves in the future.
Natalie,